Hello, everyone, and welcome, my friends, to another episode of the Machine Shop Mastery Podcast. Today, we have a very cool guest. It's my pleasure to introduce Justin Quinn from Focused on Machining. Justin owns a fast-growing shop near the Denver, Colorado area. He shares a lot of wisdom with us today, from the importance of marketing, the importance of core values, which we've heard from other guests as well, wisdom on starting a second shift and the trials and tribulations he went through while doing that. Anyway, we get into a lot of great topics. I'm sure you'll get some great stuff from this. So without further ado, let's go chat with Justin. And thanks so much again for joining. Hello, Justin.
Oh.
Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. Doing great. Really excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to have you here, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. I really enjoy doing stuff like this, actually.
It is a lot of fun. I'm still learning the ropes here with this podcasting thing, but having a good time sitting down and talking to experienced shop owners. So looking forward to talking to you. So let's start by having you share a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up owning a machine shop.
Sure. So I'll kind of go back to high school. When I got out of high school, I actually joined the Air Force, and that was always the career path I wanted to do. I originally wanted to be a pilot growing up, and really wasn't that great of a student. So I enlisted, figuring, I'll go learn how to work on airplanes, and that'll help me become a pilot someday. So I enlisted, joined the Air Force, was an aircraft mechanic on C-17, which is a cargo aircraft. I was stationed up there near you, actually, in Tacoma, Washington, for 6 years, and just first couple of years worked, learned the airplane, learned all the systems, and then I actually started flying with the aircraft, and that was really interesting because it was literally me as the mechanic by myself. I had a toolbox and a laptop that had all the maintenance manuals on it, and I was traveling to all ends of the world, just keeping these aircraft flying and serviced and making sure that any issues arose, I took care of them. And that's kind of where I started doing that as a 20-year-old, all the way until I got out at 24. And so that's really where I believe where I got my independence from, where I got my kind of no fear approach to things, because I had to figure things out as I went. And I had a very limited set of tools, but I had a support system behind me, right? I could call back, I could call my home station, I could call the robust supply chain of the Air Force. And so I just traveled the world and did what I could, did the best I could. And that's kind of where I think I got that confidence from, and got that independence, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. So then
that's a lot of experience. That's some heavy stuff on an early 20-something to be responsible for a huge plane like that.
Well, it's
safety of everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things the military does unbelievably well, is that they take young kids straight out of high school and through basic training and through tech school, which are very regimented programs, right? I mean, they really. They to be honest with you, they really break you down as a human being, right? That's what basic training is all about, is they break you down. They kind of break down your walls, break down your comfort levels. And then the second half of basic training, they build you back up into the airman or soldier or Marine, what have you, that they want you to be. And a lot of that's confidence-based. A lot of that's, for the Air Force, it was so much attention to detail, paying attention to the little things. And then you go into tech school where it's a little less regimented. You have a little bit more life freedom, but it's still classroom environment with a lot of Air Force training overlaid onto that. So you're still learning about the core values of the military, et cetera, but you're doing your specific job training. So in my instance, we were learning how to work on aircraft. And then from there, they release you to your duty station, and this is kind of where the field starts to separate, right? Where people that are really solid all around, really want to grow, want to push and drive, that's where they could really excel and and do things by learning more of the systems. That's how I kind of stood out early on. When I wasn't busy with my job, I would go and seek out the other specialties on the aircraft and work with them and train with them. And so I got to learn more parts of the aircraft than some people in my career field did. And that's what allowed me to go flying eventually, because as a flight mechanic, you have to have a lot of certifications that if you just wait for them to give you, you're never going to get them. You really have to go out and get them yourself. So, but yeah,
Very
it's
cool.
a lot of responsibility.
Lessons,
but I think it's really great. It's really great for young people. I was not ready for college. I knew I wasn't ready because I wasn't that great of a student in high school. So I knew more freedom and less oversight was not going to be a good thing for me. So the military was perfect for me.
Awesome. And then what'd you do after you got out?
So I got out, actually enrolled in college. I had the GI Bill. So I actually had decided a couple years before I got out that I had wanted to go to college. So I started doing some schooling in the military. So I took a lot of, humanities, ethics, kind of like some of the general courses. I got a lot of those out of the way while I was in the Air Force. And then I got out. I transferred to university right away, started my bachelor's degree, and I finished my bachelor's degree in 2.5 years. And that's partially because I did some while I was in, but mostly because I went full time. I didn't take summers off. There's that month in between, the Christmas break, if you will. You get like a month off there. Yep. I always took one class during that break. So I just jammed it in, and I was so used to working in, being in the military that I just, having 3 months off, I was like, what am I going to, I don't, what am I going to do? So,
might as well make it productive.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of the GI Bill is interesting how it's structured. You actually get an allotment of time, so like I had 36 months worth of credits available to me. Whether you take one class or 10 classes, it still counts the same time. So for me, it was advantageous to take as many classes as I could, because that allowed me to stretch my GI Bill further.
Right.
So I got my bachelor's degree, 2.5 years, and then I took a job in banking as a financial analyst. I worked for the holding company of the bank, and there I did a lot of financial preparations. I prepared the bank financials. We had a bunch of branches spread out, so I would take those branch financials and consolidate them up into one financial. I did a lot of reporting to the CEO, to the board. Believe it or not, I presented those financial reports to those people. And also, while I was in banking, I went to night school and got my MBA. And so got a bachelor's in finance, and then got my master's, my MBA with an emphasis in entrepreneurship. And I did that at night while I worked at the bank. And part of the reason why I wanted to push so hard with my schooling with the GI Bill is the GI Bill actually covered my MBA as well, all but one semester. So I had to pay for the last semester out of pocket. But essentially, I got both of those degrees paid for through the GI Bill, which was phenomenal.
I knew you were always a smart guy. So yeah, brilliant tactic. But that is going from aircraft mechanic to finance and sitting behind a desk crunching numbers all day. That's a big difference. Why finance?
Well, I don't know what drew me to finance really. Being in the Air Force and flying, I had a lot of in-flight time where as a mechanic, you're really not, the airplane's flying, everything's going well, you're not doing anything. So I picked up a lot of books, and I read a lot of books, and started reading about investing, started reading about business, started reading about stocks, the market, and I don't know what it was, but it kind of drew me in. I was very fascinated by it. And in the military, you obviously would have a pension and things, but you can also set up 401ks. And I had a guy I was deployed with in the Middle East early on in my career. He's the one that really opened my eyes to investing. And, of course, he had his military pension stuff going, but he also put a lot of money away into his own personal 401k. And he was the one that kind of got me into buying stocks. And he and I were looking at it when we were deployed in the Middle East. And I bought my first couple stocks there, and it was kind of exciting, watching them go up and down. And so that kind of what fueled that, and I just got deeper and deeper into it the more I read. And so that's what drove me to finance out of college. It's kind of important to know that I come from a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs. I have an uncle that was a truck driver out of high school and ended up working in the tire shop for his trucking company, and then ended up starting his own tire business. And he's owned that for 30 years. He actually just transitioned it to my two cousins a couple of years ago. So he was a good influence on me growing up. I have another uncle who, in the IT space, did his own IT consulting, had his own IT business, traveled the world and did IT stuff. And both of these gentlemen, made a great living for themselves, really, really provided for their family well. So that was something I always wanted to do, was to have my own business. And actually, while I was in undergrad, me and my two cousins that now own the tire shop, we did fix and flips. So we bought our first house. We moved into it. We lived in it. We fixed it up while we were living in it, and then we sold it. We took the profits there, and we bought a second house, and then we decided to rent a house to move into to live. And then we bought another house, completely just remodeled it, and then sold it. And so we kind of did that a few times, and that's what helped pay our other expenses throughout college. So that was kind of my first foray into business. Then I took that from there. I took that to banking. And then when I was at banking is where I kind of really realized that there was so much more to business than what I had honestly known and what my degree had prepared me for. And so after I was working in the finance department for a while, I transitioned to underwriting, where I started looking into loans. And this is where I really learned a lot about company financials and businesses and how they work from a financial perspective, because I would gather their financials, go through them, analyze them, and help the lender make a loan decision on whether it was something wise to do or not. I did that for a couple of years, and then transitioned into being a lender myself, to where I was, and this is kind of where I got my sales experience. I would go out, try to meet business owners, try to meet businesses, try to acquire loans to bring into the company, work with the underwriters, try to get them approved, and do that. So, and through my sales experience, I was part of the Rocky Mountain NTMA as a banker. Trying to meet machine shops, manufacturers. Manufacturing was an industry as a bank that we went after pretty aggressively. Banks like manufacturing companies because there's decent collateral. They always have good equipment. They always need more equipment. They need lines of credit. So from a banking perspective, manufacturers were great banking customers.
Sure.
And so that's where I started to meet a lot of the manufacturers, and it was through that I realized how much I missed what I call the blue collar environment, right? And I don't mean that negatively at all. Being in bank, I wore a suit, tie every day, and it was not conducive to my personality. I really missed turning wrenches. I missed getting dirty. I missed doing that kind of stuff. And when I started to meet manufacturers, it really brought me back to that. And I really felt comfortable with that group of people. After another couple of years, just going through and meeting so many business owners, I just kind of had this sense that I could do this, right? Like I could own my own business. And at this time, my wife and I had we just had our daughter. She was 1 year old. So I told my wife, I said, I've always wanted to do something in business. I've always wanted to have my own business. And, now's the time to give it a shot, right? Before we have a couple more kids, before we move into our second home and we have a bigger mortgage, or before we have another car payment, something like that. We've always lived pretty frugally. And so it took me a long time to get her on board because she was not like, let's risk everything kind of person.
Sure.
Especially going into manufacturing, which, I really knew nothing about. come to find out, my military experience translates really well. However, I still was not experienced in the industry. So finally got her on board, and then just started meeting people through RMTMA, talking with as many people as I can, kind of telling them my idea that, hey, I want to buy a manufacturing company. Here's my background. Here's why. Here's all the things I love about it. The manufacturing industry, right? Like we work together. Like it's a very team environment for the most part.
Sure it is.
So as my name kind of kept getting around and around and around, I started meeting a lot of people, and a lot of people were very curious to know me and to know why the heck I wanted to buy a shop. And it led me to the previous owner of Focused on Machining. He and I actually met very early on in my search. And he was kind of one of the guys that was more intrigued with why I wanted to get in and what my thoughts were versus wanting to sell to me. So the first time we met, we just talked about what I wanted to do, why, etc. And then I went on my way. He went on his way. I looked at other shops. I wrote offers. I kept writing offers the whole time. And he actually called me up about 6 months later, just out of the blue, and said, hey, let's go to lunch. So he took me to lunch. And then at this lunch, he started asking very specific valuation questions. It was like, hey, how are you valuing shops? How are you putting a number on a shop? Right. And through my banking experience, I kind of told him, well, it's all cash flow based, right? So I look back a couple of years and I decipher what the cash flow of the business is, and then I apply some multiple to that. And then I kind of factor in, because I didn't have a bunch of money to put into this. I really was going to need loans to make this happen. So I factored in that cash flow and what loan it could support. Just no different as I would do as an underwriter. And that's kind of how I valued the businesses. And so he started asking me, he's like, well, what value would put on my shop? And so I asked him, I said, well, tell me what your numbers are. Like, give me some ballpark. What's your numbers? What's your sales, your net profit, what's your taxes, depreciation, all that stuff. And he told me all that. And I kind of just did some rough back of the napkin, math. And I said, well, it'd be about here, taking what you've told me cash flow wise, applying this multiple, I think it's going to be in this ballpark. And he kind of sat there for a minute, just with like a blank stare on his face. And he says, yeah, so that sounds pretty good. He's like, you should come by my shop. And I was like, are you serious? Wow. And I had toured Focused on the machining, and it was a beautiful facility. He had it was the white floors, the well lit facility. He had a decent amount of equipment. And so I was like, are you serious? Like you really are interested in selling? He's like, yeah. He's like, I've been kind of following you. I've heard your name now for 6-8 months. Like you're still at it. He's like, I like who you are. I like everything about you. He's like, you should consider it. I said, okay, send me your financials. I gave him a whole list of stuff I needed. I went back to work. He went back to his office. By the end of the day, he had me everything. I spent all night putting it all together, putting it in a package and analyzing it. I met him at Focused on Machining the next morning. I said, okay, based on everything I can see, here's my number. I threw it out there. He's like, okay, that sounds good. We kind of negotiated on a couple of things. And within 30 minutes, we had shaken hands and we agreed on everything. And then from there, we both called our attorneys, and boy, they had the whole thing put together in like 18 days, and we closed. And my first day at Focused on Machining was as the owner, and I just jumped in with 2 feet, and it's been insanity ever since.
What a crazy story. So I'm curious, if you don't mind sharing, so did you take out loans for the entire amount, and did you have to pay him all at once, or was it an earnout? Like, how do you get that much money to buy a shop? Did you put your house up for collateral?
Yeah. So that was, he wanted some cash in hand. This is part of the luck of my life. We bought our house in 2010. So we got a great price on it. And then as this was 2016, so we had significant equity in our home. So I took out a home equity line. I gave him, a 6-figure check from our home equity line. And then he financed the rest. He carried the loan. So I still today am making loan payments to him every single month. And that kind of was a good situation for him, right? Because he he didn't want to be retired yet. He wanted to step down. He wanted to semi-retire. He was actually moving to Nebraska. That's where his family was from. So for him, he's like, well, having a pretty nice check every single month, that sounds really nice to me. So he gets my check every month. He's working full time still, so he's making
for you.
No, for another. He actually works in manufacturing still, but out in Nebraska. So he's collecting a salary there. He gets my loan check every single month, and yeah, it actually worked out well. And I think for people like me, I think probably the majority of deals like that are going to be some sort of an owner carry, just because a bank isn't going to give someone a loan that doesn't have industry experience, right? Whether you could do it or not, they're just not going to do that, or they're going to want 50% down. They're going to want to take a lien on they're going to take everything they can. So owner carry is really kind of one of the main options for someone like myself. And especially in a small business.
Right. Can you share what percent you gave him down, and then how many years the term was?
I gave him about 15% down.
Okay.
Yeah. So gave him about 15% down, and then. With my banking experience, I negotiated the loan very well, and this is one of the points of negotiation. Yeah, he wanted a little bit more money than I originally offered, and I said, "I'll give you that much money if you give me my loan terms." And so that was one of the biggest negotiating points we had. And my loan terms were a 15-year, fully amortized fixed loan at 4.5%. I spread the balance out over 15 years. Made that payment, to the size to where I could afford it and swallow it, right? Like if I was going to give them a 5-year loan, that would have been tens of thousands of dollars a month type of deal.
Right.
Spreading it out over 15 years allowed the payment size to come down. And then I didn't want any balloon payments, anything like that. I just wanted a fully amortized deal. That way, if I wasn't in a position to refinance it, I didn't have to. I didn't have to force myself into a financial decision down the road.
And have you been able to largely pay those monthly payments just out of the cash flow of the business?
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
It hasn't. I shouldn't say easily. There were definitely times early on when it was tough. One of the things I did early on is I hired a general manager. Because I couldn't estimate. I still today can't really do those things. I can do them better than I could, but I only do it when I have to. So I hired a general manager, brought him in to really help me run the operations, if you will. So those, that first period was tough because, I'm taking salary out of the business. I've got another high-level manager taking a salary. And so cash was extremely tight for the first year and a half. And it was that year and a half time point where me and that general manager actually parted ways. I had a good enough handle on the business to where I really wanted to push hard and grow, add new customers, take the shop that direction. And he was very happy with the size it was. He didn't want to take on the extra burden of more employees, more machines. So we parted ways. I actually promoted one of my guys off the floor into kind of that general manager role to where he was doing the estimating, quoting, programming, scheduling, taking care of those things for me. And from that point on is really when we started hitting our extreme growth rate. And just, with he and my vision aligned on growth, we added equipment, we replaced old equipment, we hired people, we found new customers. We've been growing significantly since, which, it's interesting because cash has still been tight through growth, but in different manners, we're having extremely profitable months. Like the financials look great, but then you turn around, it's like, okay, I need a CMM now. And you just spend $50,000 on a CMM, so it's like the financials look great and healthy, but because of our growth and the addition of equipment, hiring new staff, buying all these things, cash still is something we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, growth eats cash for sure.
For sure.
I mean, even just buying more materials for bigger jobs and cutting tools and all the things that you need to execute the work.
I actually looked.
You got to typically pay for those earlier than you get to invoice your clients for and get paid.
And that was that. I actually looked at this the other day. I think the first year I took the business over, we spent like $24,000 on cutting tools, in the whole year, and we are spending close to $10,000 to $15,000 a month now. So it's like, that's kind of the growth we've experienced, where it's just our bills are bigger than our purchase orders are bigger than they've ever been, but so are the bills that come with them.
Of course, yeah, that can be scary, can't it?
Yeah, it sure can. But I get so much confidence from the industry, right? Like being part of NTMA is really big for me, because I get to talk to shops like Mosey's, right? And if you don't know Bob Mosey, he's a third generation owner in California. His entire family is just manufacturing through and through, and he's been a huge resource to me. It's such a down to earth group of people that I could send a text or pick up the phone and call any one of these shops across the country and get advice from, and just be like, hey man, I've just been getting my butt kicked lately, and here's what I'm dealing with. And he's like, oh, that's nothing, you're going to deal with that every quarter. Get used to that. But here's what you can do to help, kind of thing, And it's such a great group of people. That's what gives me great confidence in pushing growth and not being too stressed about cash issues sometimes, because owning your own business can be a lonely venture, right? Like you can't share some of those struggles with your employees. You can't let them know how tight things are and how stressed out you are with finances. And then you don't want to take it home to your wife, right? You don't want to put that burden on her either. So there's a lot of times when it's like you feel like you're the only one that has all these burdens. But that's what I love about the industry is we all have those burdens. They're different burdens, but it's really nice to be able to share those with other owners, and to really just kind of have sounding boards out there to help you through some of those tough times.
That really speaks to me as well. The sort of lonely at the top, I know, when we owned our shop, it was hard because in your geographic region, you very likely might be competitors with the shop next, down the street with you. So you don't want to share too much, but at the same time, who can you talk to that has gone through the same things that you have? So those industry groups like NTMA definitely provide a lot of value.
Yeah.
And I'm always, one of the things that, speaking of just like how helpful the industry is and how down to earth they are, I'm in, various, groups online where people pose a question. They're like, hey, I'm having trouble with this or that. And in like more than any other sort of community that I've ever experienced, in like 3 hours, there'll be like 100 people answering that question, right? And sharing their experience and what they've done. And it's just so overwhelmingly, supportive. It's remarkable. It feels great to be a part of it.
Yeah. One of the things I tell my employees, because they don't necessarily see that side of it. But for instance, there's the machine shop next door to us, right? And we go over there all the time, like shopping for materials sometimes, and be like, hey, we're one piece short. Do you have any of this? Or we're looking for a thread gauge, right? Like this custom thread gauge we ordered, it's back ordered now. Do you have one we can borrow? And they do the same thing to us. And sometimes it kind of blows my employees away. But, I tell them, I said, this business is hard enough. Just making parts in spec, on time, and with a profit is hard enough. We don't need to be at each other's throats to make it any worse. And that's my approach with it. And I think that's most machine shop owners' approach too, is that there's enough struggles inside the four walls that fighting with other shops and stuff like that, it's not needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a good summary of why we're doing this podcast, right? To have people like yourself share things they've gone through, trials, and have other shop owners learn from you.
Absolutely.
So,
And I think it's important to always be learning too, right? Like, just to give a quick story, I mentioned Bob Mosey earlier. He's been at his shop for, I think, 30 years, if not more. And like I said, he's third generation, so his shop's been around for quite some time. This last tour I did in California at an NTMA event, he had me over to his shop, did a tour. Again, I was asking questions to him, and then a really interesting thing happened at the end. He sat down with me in his conference room. He's like, okay, now I have some questions for you. And we talked a lot about marketing and what I'm doing marketing wise and how my social media stuff. It just kind of hit me because here is the guy that I've been asking questions to for all these years and someone I looked up to. And because I don't, maybe it's because I have a business degree or because I'm younger or just have a different approach, but I take marketing seriously. I put a lot of investment time into marketing. And he saw that as a huge positive and something he wanted to learn. So it was very interesting to have one of my mentors start asking me questions about how I run the business.
I love that. That's awesome. So you have you about how many employees did the company have when you bought it, and how have you grown? How have you hired? What's that look like?
So when I took the company over, there were 8 of us total, and that was counting myself.
Okay.
We didn't have full-time quality then. We really didn't have anybody else in the office. It was just myself and my general manager. We did so it was us 2, and then 6 machinists. That was the size of the company. When I took it over, and for the first couple of years, we would add someone and then lose someone. So we kind of bounced around that 8, 9, 10 number for seemed like 2 years. And then I started replacing some of the old equipment, and that's what really kind of changed our focus. Because when I took over, the owner had built the company on used equipment. I think like most people do that, start from scratch, right? You buy a used machine and you keep going. And they were good machines, but to do anything tighter than, I'd say 3 thou was more of an art than a science, right? It was okay. you had to make the machine do what it what you needed it to do versus what it should do just with code. And so as I started replacing some of the old equipment with new equipment, man, we found that not only can we go faster and more aggressive, like when you program something to 2 thou, it cuts to 2 thou and it's there. And so because of that, we started feeling more comfortable going after some of the more challenging work. So we moved away from some of our because when I took it over, it was an offload shop for other shops, right? Like when other shops got busy, we would do their work. We had customers that were in the sheet metal space, so they would do all their sheet metal bending, and then we would drill and tap holes in sheet metal. If they had a component that needed to be machined that was part of their assembly, we might make that. It was just simple machining work. So we started going after more complex work, right? Higher end customers, customers that needed certified material. We just kind of dipped our toes in that water, and we just kind of leveled up our game, if you would. And through that, then one of my guys had an interest in quality, so he kind of straddled for a while for us to where he was on the lathe, and then he was also the quality guy sometimes. So we just kind of slowly grew into roles, and we put extra hats on people that wanted growth, and until we got so much to where we could take that hat off and hire someone to fill that role. And so we until 2020, it was kind of still a solid growth rate, maybe 10-15% a year, but it was maybe hiring 1 or 2 people a year kind of thing. And then COVID happened, and I was adamant that we were not going to let the country down, if you will, kind of thing, and I think this kind of came from my military background to where, when shit hits the fan, we're there regardless kind of thing. And so, I started marketing and saying, hey, we're not going anywhere. In fact, we're proud to be here. We're proud to be at work. We're proud to be on that exemption list. So if your shop's shutting down or you still have production needs, like, please reach out to us. Like, we're here. We're working. We're not staying home. Like, please keep us busy, kind of thing. And man, we just got swamped. Like,
really,
we actually grew 41% in 2020. With not only new
amazing.
customers, right? I mean, we had a lot of new customers, but our existing customers just were growing like crazy as well. We're fortunate to be in industries that did well with COVID. So, yeah, we hired, I want to say we went from, let's say, 12 to, no, I'd say it was more 10. We probably went from 10 to 15 people that year, so we grew 50%, our staff 50% that year. We hired a formal quality manager, right? We had somebody in quality full time. We continued to add machinists, and it was throughout 2020 to where we really hit our shop's capacity. Before we'd always had more equipment, more time on the floor than what we sold. And it was finally in 2020 to where it was like, oh my God, like, we have more work on the books that we can physically get done and the amount of time that we've allotted, right? If everything goes perfectly smooth, we're going to be late. Like, we're going to have issues.
Sure.
So early in 2020, part of the end of my 2020 planning session, early 2021, we decided to start a second shift. And it was out of necessity, right? Like, our customers were coming to us, just they wanted us to do more work, and in order to keep them happy and to keep growing with them, we had to expand our facility, and square footage was not an option to add, just in the building we're in. So we did it through another shift. So I hired 4 people all at once. I hired a quality inspector for the weekend shift. Actually, I moved my quality guy to the weekend shift and then backfilled him. So I hired 4 machinists essentially all at once. And we did like a 3-week training kind of with them where they shadowed people on the shop floor. And then what we did is we slowly transitioned. And I had moved the shop to 410s many years ago with kind of a weekend shift in mind. And then, my thought was, well, we work 410s, and if we're not busy, you get Fridays off. If we are busy, you come in, you work overtime, and then we're not eating into the weekend. Because when I first took the shop over, overtime was Saturdays and Sundays, and it's just
ouch. Yeah,
it sucks, right? Like,
it's hard for families.
Yeah. I found that it wasn't the hours that people mind putting in, but like when you're eating up Saturdays and Sundays, that's hard for people. So we brought everybody in, and then we slowly migrated, right? So we had them there Monday through Thursday, and then it was Tuesday through Friday. The next week was Wednesday through Saturday, and then finally we made the big jump and we shifted them to Friday to Sunday, and they worked 12-hour shifts. So that's kind of how we did our second shift, and it came with its bumps and bruises. We quickly learned how much the shop relied on us folks in the office to answer questions and to give explanations and details, because on the weekend shift, right, they don't have that support. So we realized how many holes we had process-wise, right? Like, the lack of information that was available to the machinists, we always just took it for granted, right? Like, you could just walk out there and be like, oh, yeah, I remember that customer called and said they wanted this, this, and this. Oh, okay, and then they'll do it. Well, when you don't have that support there, everything comes to a stop, and it's a much bigger deal. So I would say we spent the majority of 2021 like retooling processes and just getting the business to where it should have always been, to where information is available. And when a customer calls or a customer emails and says, hey, make this change, it goes into the system, and not just somebody remembering. So it took us most of 2021 to make that happen. And we had, it was challenging. It was stressful on our production management team. It was stressful on the weekend guys. It was stressful on the weekday guys. We had increased scrap rates, we had loss of efficiencies. Everything that we didn't want to happen happened throughout this weekend shift adventure. But we just kept at it, and we kept improving things one by one. And when something was broken, we fix it. And I'd say 8-9 months later, we have a much smoother operation with multiple shifts than we did when we started. And it's not perfect today, but it's to the point now to where the managers on the weekday, like we might get one text a weekend, maybe a phone call, maybe we go a weekend we don't get anything, but it's a far cry from getting 5 calls a day and being like, just shut it down, right? Like it's just shut it down. It's easier for everybody if we just stop.
Sure.
So that was a big challenge in 2021. And so huge growth in 2020, not so much growth in 2021, a lot of change, a lot of process change, a lot of improvements. And 2022 is off to a hell of a year. So in 2021, we did 1.8 million, and we might do 3 million this year. So it's like, I tell my employees and everybody, it seems crazy to me that we might skip the entire range of 2 million for revenue. Like we might go from 1.8 to 3 million and never have a year where we did anything in 2 million range. So it's kind of crazy. But it's all those processes that we fixed, right? It's all those things that we spent time fixing in 2021 are coming back to us tenfold in 2022. And what we've done is we've almost unleashed capacity we didn't have. We're way more efficient now. We're not breaking down a machine, programming the next job for a day, and then setting up and running. We're breaking down a machine, and that next job is up and running in like an hour, kind of thing. So that's kind of what I mean when we unleashed capacity we didn't know we had, just by improving our processes and having things put together before they get to the shop floor.
So it really sounds like the decision to make a weekend shift just forced your hand to improve processes company-wide, which has had major effects on your day shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it was more than that, though. It was my unwillingness to let the weekend shift fail, because there was, I'll be honest, I lost a couple employees in 2021, a couple of key employees because of this. But I was not willing to give up, right? Like I told them, I said, not having a weekend shift is not an option. Like I know things are bad. I know we have a lot to fix, but failing is not an option. We will continue and we will push, and you keep coming to me with problems and we'll keep coming up with solutions. And so, I'll be honest, I did lose employees because of that, because they wanted to just can the whole thing. And it's kind of that. And this is why, machine shops get to a certain point and they kind of stop growing, right? Like whatever that level is, it's the comfort level of the owner and of management that I can control all of these things. But when you start pushing that level up, it takes a different set of people. It takes different mindsets. So late 2021, early 2022, we changed over management. I didn't want to do this. I hadn't planned on it, but we graduated, if you will, from that manager who wasn't really a manager, but just was great at putting out fires, to now I hired 2 great shop foremen who are process oriented. They came from very large manufacturing companies, Lockheed Martin to be specific, right? Like where it's all about process and it's all about paperwork and procedures. So I brought 2 of those folks in, and they've continued fixing some of the things that we've had, and they've replaced them with process, with documentation. And as terrible and as boring as some of those things sound, it makes a world of difference in what a shop can achieve.
Wow, great advice. Did you find that, especially hiring employees that came from such large companies, did they hit the ground running in a 15, 20 person shop, or was there some cultural things that had to come to alignment with just such different? I've heard different stories of people, hiring someone from a massive company, but the fit was, just ended up being terrible and it didn't succeed.
I would say, so it was kind of night and day, right? So like when I would hire when we were still small, like I had to show people the how more, right? Like, oh, here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. Here's how we do this. And then, they were really good at being like figuring out the process because we had no process, right? So like any way you want to achieve this is fine. Like this is just what you need to do. But when I hired these gentlemen, it was the opposite because they knew the what, they knew the how. They were experienced in how to make parts, how to program, how to plan, how to schedule. So this was more of like the where questions, like where is this done? Where is the scheduling done? What's the procedure for scheduling? What's the process for programming? Where do you save your program? It was kind of the where do things happen.
Right.
And some of it was like, oh, we do that here. Some was like, oh, but you got to develop that because this has been just a random assortment of things we've done in the past. So that's something you should put on your list to develop and tell the rest of the shop where and how. I would say they hit the ground running very well. They did the day-to-day stuff very well. And then the things we had to train on and align culturally were the process. How,
right.
For instance, the programming, like we used to save all of our programs in a server here on the shop in a file structure. Well, our ERP system is cloud-based, and I really drive everybody to that cloud. And so that was a big process change. It was like, okay, we're not saving programs here anymore. We're not going back to here because it's hard to control the file structure. You can see all the different versions of programs into one file. So converting them to, no, here's your work order, your program's here, the program that we want you to use, the approved one that we've given you is here. So those are the kind of procedural process changes that we went through.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
And it was, so, let me caveat that a little bit, is when I hire, I always talk technical, I always talk skill set, but I have focused extremely heavily on culture and kind of size fit, right? So when I was doing these interviews for shop foremans, it was all about culture. Tell me how you react when you deal with a problem, right? Let's say you give a machinist a program that is proven out and he scraps a part because he made an offset. Tell me how you're going to deal with that. Tell me what you're going to do. This is something I've spent a lot of time developing as well as like our core values, like innovation, right? We're a small shop. We don't have everything well defined. So when you get to something that's not developed, how are you going to be innovative? Like, talk to me about innovation. How do you come up with new things, new ways of doing things, new ideas? Integrity was another one. Like just being good, honest, hardworking people. We really focused on trying to figure out what are the characteristics of the people that we have here that we love, and then that we want more of. And we really focus on those things in the interview process. Because the day-to-day stuff we can train, right? So, and that's what we found. When I found this gentleman from Lockheed Martin, I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to land it. I thought there's no way my tiny little shop is going to pull him away from all the benefits and lovely things that Lockheed Martin does. Just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But what I discredited myself was he wasn't a good culture fit at Lockheed Martin. He wanted to be more innovative. He wanted to be more free.
Right.
He wanted to have a say in company direction. He wanted these things that we provided, and that's what uncovering that characteristic aspect in the interview process really brought to light. And that's why when he started, we didn't have those problems because that's why he was looking for a job. He wasn't a cultural fit there, and he was more cultural fit for us.
That's a great insight. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely folks that are big company people, and there are folks that are small company people, and really feel at home in one or the other. And there's no right or wrong to either of those.
Absolutely,
of course.
Right. But having one of those people in the wrong spot, it's just that's the job you go to that you just can't get out of bed for every morning, right? Because it's counter to your personality, and it drains you versus feeds you.
Yeah. Well, I love that. It's funny. This is a relatively new podcast, but I'm already hearing themes. Just recorded an episode this morning, and culture and core values came up in big time. So, love that. I do want to get into ask you a little bit more about how you get your sales and diversify when you're doing that. But before we get into that, I just want to ask. Obviously, adding a weekend shift was a pretty huge strategic move for you. What other things would you say are your sort of biggest wins that have led to your success?
Yeah, so I would say early on in 2020, that year we had the extreme growth. We really sat down as a team and we defined who our perfect customer was. Because somebody brand new to the industry, when I first took this shop over, so many owners were telling me, like, you got to find your niche. You got to find your thing, right? Like, what are you really good at? And, God, I wanted to be good at everything. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to do the prototype stuff. Yeah. I wanted to take on that 10,000 piece order. And to me, I was like, well, why not? Why can't I? Like, prove it to me that I can't. Well, after a couple of years, this business will prove to you that, yeah, you really do need to be good at one thing, because it's too hard to spread across too many aspects, if you will. And so we sat down and we just defined who our best customer was, or better yet, who were the customers we already had that just were a pain in our neck, and why were they a pain in the neck? What made them a pain in the neck? And we just went through that process and we talked about it. Well, why is this one a pain in the butt? Like, what do they do that we don't like? Oh, okay, so if they did the opposite, it'd be great for us. And so we kind of came up with this perfect customer and what that part is, right? And we defined that. And ever since we defined that, everything has been so much easier, right? Like, sales and marketing is easier. Saying yes or no to quotes is easier. Pricing is easier for us. Now, we can quote expedites better. Like, we find that we say, I don't say I say no more than I used to, but I feel better when I say no, right? Like, I think every machine shop owner can relate to this. When the shop slows down and you're kind of worried about next month, you take jobs that you shouldn't take, and you stretch and you step out of your capability set. And what I really learned those first 3 years is that every time we did that, it really hurt, right? Because now we have this job that is not profitable. We really can't maybe make like the customer needs. It takes longer, it takes more time than we think. And by the time that job is up and running and getting going, the business the work has come back. So now here we are, we have this opportunity, but we can't take advantage of it because we have this crappy job that we took that's going to take 2 more weeks on a machine, not making any money. And so it's still something I struggle with as an owner, is like saying no when we don't have the boats filled, kind of thing. Right. But that's where having a really strong marketing, that's where those things are so important, because that's what keeps you from having those slow months, or that's what gives me the comfort to say no. We're not super busy right now, but it's just not a great fit for us. And then we kind of came and haul for a couple weeks, and then okay, here the flood comes back again. Because in my experience, and I've only been at this 5.5 years, but it always comes back. It always, I don't understand how the ebbs and flows work, but it seems like they're there, and the work has always come back around a little bit.
Good advice. So, like I said, I'd love to dig into how you find customers, how you grew, so much over 2020. You started into marketing. Are they finding you? Are they finding you from your website? Is it social media? Are you doing a lot of networking events, cold calling people? Yeah, how do you find customers?
I'd say it's all of the above except for the cold calling one.
Okay.
When I first took over, I used to try to find the customer, right? So I would do that cold call thing. I would do the email campaign. Like, I would try to go out and find them and be like, hey, let me do your work for you. and what really changed in our marketing was, I want to say 3 years ago, so maybe 2.5 years in, is where we were growing enough to where I couldn't do it full time anymore, right? Like I still am the salesperson, but I have a team now. We were getting big enough to where I couldn't do the marketing all by myself anymore, and so I started looking for help. And I've gone through a few marketing companies. I hired my first one, and the plan is they're going to develop blogs. Because if you talk to any website, right, any website person, they're going to tell you the key to having a good website that people can find is having updated content, new stuff coming to the website, relevant content. It's all about content. And one of the best ways to do that is through blog topics, right? And manufacturing is great for blogs because you can do a one-page blog on so many things in manufacturing. So I hired a company. They started writing blogs for me, and I quickly realized they know nothing about manufacturing, right? Like you just you just feel it coming off the page. It's like, oh my God, if I publish this, no one's going to come to me because they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about. So I went from them to another one who had manufacturing experience, but not really machine shop experience, right? So they understood sheet metal, they understood some plating, welding, fabricating. So the language was better, but still not to the level of detail that I wanted to get to. So then I went to my third marketing company, and the third one was really, that's all they do is market for machine shops specifically. And that was really the thing that moved the needle for us, because now our blog topics were extremely focused and extremely well written. And some of our blogs have been, I don't want to say the industry standard, but some of our blog topics are so well written and so much detail that people are coming across that when they're researching topics. We're becoming a reference for some things. And that also is what's different, is we're talking to a different person. I used to try to call companies and get a hold of the owner and, hey, how do I get on your vendor list? How do I get into purchasing? Now we speak to engineers and purchasing people. So our blog content is geared towards the engineer designing a part, or the purchasing agent trying to fulfill a bunch of POs. So those are the people that we cater to. And what we've found is that, in purchasing, just like in all things, there's a generational shift happening, right? Most of my buyers now are young, I'd say 20 to young 30-somethings, right? That's my demo. Well, I'm late 30s, but I think I relate more with them than I do the 50-somethings. For me, if I don't know something, first place I'm going to is Google, right? That's just who I am and how I was built.
Yep.
And so that's what we cater to, right? If you're an engineer and you're designing a part for Nitronic 60, well, guess what? We've done a blog topic on Nitronic 60. So if you Google Nitronic 60 Denver or just Nitronic 60, Focused on Machines is going to pop up in your first handful of categories. And you might not be at the position to where you look and offload, but we're going to be on your radar, and so that's what we do. All of our lead gen now is all inbound. I mean, people are finding us, which I think is a fantastic place to be in, because we're not trying to find people, trying to judge what's a good fit for us or what's not. People are coming to us with their parts, and we get to decide whether they're good fit for us. So that's really been the big change for us, was finding somebody that was really machine shop specific and could really speak the language and really talk about uniqueness of what manufacturers in machining deal with. And we're just hitting the right audience, right? We're reaching a much broader audience. And honestly, because we're doing all of that and we're posting on LinkedIn multiple times a week, because we're out there so much, we've got more RFQs than we can even handle, which brings out another challenge of our business. We've been offloading a lot of work lately, right? And it's interesting how we went from the shop that used to
I was
take
just going to
offload
say,
work to now the shop giving offload work. And it comes with a whole nother set of challenges, like, trusting another shop to make your parts and deliver quality product on time is a whole nother ball of wax to deal with.
Yes, indeed it is. Yeah, in our shop, we reserved about 20% of our revenue for offload. So we always had a value stream, and that was strategic it helped us, in the ebbs and flows of business. We get a big order, we could offload some stuff maybe. But when things tightened up again, we could pull some of that work back in, right?
Yep.
And it helped us make sure our machinists stayed busy. Because, like, you're right, I totally relate. When your order book is light, you say yes to things you shouldn't say yes to.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that once you sit down and identify that perfect fit client and the types of parts you really are good at, that helps you focus your efforts on finding more of those.
Yeah. And obviously trying to find our perfect customer, there was a little balance there, right? Like, well, our perfect customer needs to be a good chunk of the market, right? We don't want our perfect customer to be just one customer that ever exists. So we tried to design our shop to kind of be in the market to where we can have significant growth.
Yeah, sure. So that is one of the things I like to ask. How do you, what does your diversification look like, in terms of industries and number of clients and how big they are with you?
Yeah. So we, I could probably pull that up here right now. I'm looking at my system here. Diversification is significant for us and important to us. I would say that we have customers in every industry except oil and gas, really. And we really haven't gone down that road. It's a bit too volatile for us, and there's just not a lot of it in our general area. So let's see here. So our biggest industry concentration is 36%. And that's in the aerospace industry, which, because we've continued to get more complicated and higher quality work, we gravitate towards aerospace, right? That's just where the need is. But other than aerospace, our next highest concentration is like 10%. So we are spread across a lot of industries, from what I call commercial, industrial, which is just, off-the-shelf product type stuff that other people are making, defense, dealing with the government directly. Food and beverage is a good sized chunk for us. Being in Colorado, where Coors was founded, a lot of canning work here, a lot of beer, craft beer work here. Cannabis, right? I put cannabis in food and beverage because the cannabis customers we deal with are on the edible side. So food and beverage is a big category for us. Industrial machines, so that's just parts going into other industrial equipment. Medical is becoming a big category for us. Never used to be, but again, something tolerance-based, right? Like, as we continue to step our game up, medical is becoming attractive to us because they have a high need for certification, traceability, and tight tolerance parts. Semiconductor is another one. We have a couple customers in the semiconductor space. So we spread that out quite a bit. And then by client,
that's awesome.
If I look over the last year, and I think I have a little bit of concentration. Oh, maybe not. My largest customer over the last year is... Sorry, I got a lot of them, so...
It's okay.
16%. 16%
nice.
is my largest customer concentration. Everybody else is in... I've got a lot that are like 1, 2, 2.5, 5, 3. So we spread our love around customer-wise quite a bit.
And would you say that, I'm kind of piecing things together, the growth from, $1 million up to 3 now, has that mostly been customers that have found you because of your marketing efforts?
I would really have to say it's been pretty evenly split between growth with existing customers and new growth.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
we've been very thankful to. We have a couple customers that we really grew up together with, if that makes sense. Like when I took the shop over, they were just developing their first product, and we made a couple parts, and their business has boomed, which means mine has boomed, and we've grown together. So we have a couple of those, but I would say it's pretty evenly split between growth with existing customers and then new customers.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Wow. I feel like, well, this is supposed to be max of an hour, but there's no hard and fast. But so we've covered a lot of ground. You've probably better than anyone else. You've really clarified for me just how the impact of focusing on consistent marketing can reap benefits in new sales.
Yes, it's marketing is one of those things where I hated spending money on it early, but now it's something that you couldn't talk me into not spending money on, because it's tough to start because it's slow, right? You're spending the money and you're like, where's the results? Where's the results? But it takes time. It takes time to build that website. It takes time to build the content. But once you get it there, it's kind of like a freight train that you can't stop. And now, we've got an unprecedented amount of quote opportunities. So much so that my poor estimating team is just like freaking out all the time. They're like, I don't know what to do. We've got so many opportunities, but it's a great, what we always say around here is we've got problems, but they're good problems to have.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Any other, any other advice, things that you would sort of as parting words to other shops, maybe not on as big a growth path earlier in their journey, besides the things you've already told us?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of reiterate and focus on some of the things that I didn't think were super important, like the core values. I always kind of felt like I should have them, but never really put much importance on them until I spent a lot of time to really develop them, like put a lot of time and effort into them. And what resulted is now we have a set of core values that we take everything back to, right? When we're dealing with employee issues, we go back to the core values, right? And one of the things that is really kind of weird for me still is like, there's great machinists out there, but they might not be a good culture fit for us, right? And before I had these developed, it's like we would never let go a good machinist, even if everybody hated them and they piss everybody off every day. It's like, well, they make good parts, so just try to ignore them. Now we make decisions differently, right? And it's like, you're a fantastic machinist, but you're cancer to our culture. You either need to change and change these things and come over to our culture, or you got to go. And what I found is in those instances where we've had to let someone go because of culture, the team really rallies around that, and they're more willing to come together to cover that gap than they are to cover for the person that pisses them off every day. So having those values defined, it allows us to make decisions easier, and it allows, as the owner, as these are the things that keep me up on night, right? Like these are the things that, what am I going to do about this person? Or, we've got this customer that is just killing us. Like, what are we going to do about this? It's so easy to take it back to the core values and be like, are they a good fit for our culture, for who we are? If they're not, you have to make the decision to move on. And it's hard to do that the first couple times, but what you realize is the culture of your shop will prosper, and that culture will cover up for the lack of employee at the time. And it's just it's a happier work environment to be in. The employees are happier. They'll work harder. If you, I've told many of my employees, it's like, I don't want to make this decision, but I think it's the best for the company. So it's going to suck, right? Like these next couple months is going to suck because we're not going to have somebody in this role, but we're going to find the right person. And 6 months from now, we'll be in a better spot. I just need your help getting through these next couple of months. And they will rally around that. They will say, absolutely, we'll do anything we can. Like just get rid of this person, sometimes. So yeah, just having those core values, the culture defined, having a well-defined culture that people lean on and love will take your business to heights that you never thought it could go. It's really powerful, surprisingly powerful.
Well, I think that's amazing wisdom to wrap up with. Thank you for that. This has really been a fun conversation. So I really appreciate all your insights. You're a remarkable business person.
Absolutely. Like I said, I love giving back, and I love sharing with other shop owners, because this business is tough and challenging, and we'll all be better off if we help each other out.
Yeah. So if people want to reach out and connect with you, can you share with us the ways you'd suggest they do that?
Absolutely.
Your website?
Yeah, so website, just www.focusedonmachining.com. My email address is first initial, last name, jquinn @focusedonmachining.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn. Again, Focused on Machining on LinkedIn, as well as Justin Quinn on LinkedIn. Any one of those methods comes straight to me. So yeah, don't hesitate to send me a message, ask a question. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome, Justin. Well, thank you, my friend. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks for sharing your wisdom, and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.